that the turnout for our Friday forums and many of our other virtual opportunities is really grown significantly since we've done it via Zoom. So I know people prefer to meet face to face, and we will do that again, but we're really grateful that you take the time on a Friday morning to spend with us. And as with our Friday forum, traditionally, I'll turn it over to our Director of Government Affairs, Steve Firman, but I really want to welcome Mike Ralston. He's been a partner and a friend for a long, long time, and having you here to give an update from ABI is really special. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Carrie.
Take it
And
away,
I
Steve.
too will welcome Mike. Mike has been the head of the Iowa Association of Business and Industry for quite some years now. Mike, how long has it been?
15 years.
15. Yep. And certainly one of our most valued partners in Des Moines as we try to work things legislatively, and also we've got a lot of really strong ABI members in the area, and they look to Mike for a lot of guidance, and so we're real proud to have him with us this morning. And Mike, I'm going to ask you to maybe share some thoughts from ABI, including your legislative agenda for the year. And Mike and I had talked, and I think it'd be real interesting to have Mike share some thoughts and observations about how manufacturers in Iowa have been coping with the COVID situation. So with that little tee up, Mike, away you go.
Steve, thank you. And Carrie, thank you too. I've had the pleasure of speaking to the Friday Forum in the past, and it's a real pleasure. So thanks to everyone. I'm always a little surprised when you know who the speaker is going to be and you tune in anyway. So thanks very much. Hey, you know, this is the truth. It's not just rhetoric. Gross Cedar Valley is a big deal to ABI. It's a big deal to Iowa. We do have a ton of members in common, both Gross Cedar Valley and ABI. And more than that, though, Iowa needs strong leadership organizations, and certainly Gross Cedar Valley is one of those. And so we've loved working with the organization for a long time, and value and really appreciate our partnership very much. So Carrie and Steve and everyone, thank you very, very much. We're going to cover a lot of stuff today, and I'm going to go pretty quickly. I know I sound the smartest when I'm not talking, so I'm going to move quickly. But if we don't cover something you want to hear about, let me know, and we'll sure talk about it. But we're going to talk a little bit about ABI, and then a kind of a brief update on the general manufacturing and business climate in the state. And then we'll end with that discussion Steve mentioned about what Iowa manufacturers have focused on in this time of COVID-19. I can't talk without sharing a little bit about ABI, because I believe so strongly in the work we do, which is very similar to the work Gross Cedar Valley does. ABI is 117 years old this year, founded in 1903. We have 1,500 plus member companies. We have member companies in all of Iowa's 99 counties. And a lot of times when people think of ABI, they think of great companies like Deere or Alcoa, Arconic now, I should say, Collins Aerospace. Those are great companies, and we really do value their membership. But a typical ABI member is more like some of the folks at Gross Cedar Valley. I know you have those big companies too, but Powers Manufacturing, Standard Golf, those kind of privately held, strong local employers, those are the typical ABI members. As I said, we've been active for over a century. It started as the Iowa Manufacturers Association, and then in the mid to late 80s expanded to become ABI and include businesses of all kinds. And we always say that ABI members employ more Iowans, pay more taxes, buy more goods, and donate more time and dollars to Iowa communities than any other single organization. ABI members are a lot like Gross Cedar Valley members. They're very involved in their community, and that's what really makes things work. We do a ton of things at ABI. They're all tied to three main things. One is public policy advocacy, and we take that mission seriously. We have all the tools you would expect of a successful public policy program, 3 full-time lobbyists, a PAC, a grassroots organizing tool, all those things. But the real key is our members, and I'll come back to that. Our second primary function is member programming and events. So just like Gross Cedar Valley, we're doing events. We do about 100 events all over Iowa all year long. And we have exciting technical seminars on exciting topics like how to have an effective employee drug testing program, or tax or environmental compliance, those sorts of things. And so we do those all the time. And our largest annual event is our annual conference. We get about 1,000 people at that. We're going to be, I believe, bringing it to Cedar Valley sometime in the next 3 or 4 years. We'll talk more about that. We have speakers like Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great, or Ken Blanchard, the author of The 1 Minute Manager. Peggy Noonan spoke last year, all those kinds of folks. Lastly, we have a foundation that focuses on community and leadership development training. You know, if you're in the Cedar Valley or Central Iowa here near Des Moines or some of the state's urban areas, things are going pretty well. We've got a lot of great development going on in this company, thanks to folks just like you all. But if you're in a place like Cherokee or Atlantic or somewhere, you may need some help with your community to make sure it's growing and sustainable. That's what we do through the ABI Foundation. Programs like Leadership Iowa, Business Horizons, which is a week-long entrepreneurial camp for high school students, and other programs. The goal there is really to make, those programs are open to all Iowans, by the way, not just ABI members. And the goal is to make sure that we're doing all we can to make our state successful. I mentioned public policy, and I want to get back to that with one real quick comment before we move on. And that is that at ABI, we don't support just Democrats or just Republicans. We support anybody who is a supporter of business. So our line is we'll support a Republican or a Democrat or a Whig or a Tory as long as they support business. And that's great. But again, the real key is ABI members. They take the time to get legislators and other state officials into their plants, into their offices, make sure they understand how their work impacts them and their business. I don't know, I'll bet Willard Jenkins, Willard, when you were in the House, I'll bet you toured many ABI member companies. I remember several of them, but
Yes.
That's the real key. We want to make sure legislators know the impact of their work. We want our members to build a relationship with their local legislative delegation. And I've been to enough Grow Cedar Valley legislative receptions, and I know you do that too, and I've seen the respect that the Cedar Valley legislative delegation has for Grow Cedar Valley, and that's terrific. It's that kind of a partnership that really makes it all work. While that's important, the public policy work we do, the other part's important too. You know, if we're not making sure members have the resources they need and training, if we're not helping communities grow so that they can sustain business, then we're not doing our job. So we focus on all three of those things and want to make sure it all works. That's probably enough about ABI, and thanks for indulging me there. Let's talk a little bit about the state of Iowa government and where we go public policy wise. The 2020 session, of course, was very different than most. They had a major hiatus right in the middle, and then the General Assembly came back to finish their work. The General Assembly did some very good things that they probably don't get enough attention for. The action they took with regard to Future Ready Iowa and other things are related to that and to training, to regents and community college funding, that was all important. We're sort of the mind here that if the state is going to spend money, spending on people is a pretty good idea. So workforce training and those sorts of things are pretty important. For 2021, I went online to see the Grow Cedar Valley agenda, and I was very familiar with the Iowa Chamber Alliance agenda. Carrie's an officer there, and there was great attention to the rollout of that organization's agenda. Our organization is very similar, almost the same. I believe the Grow Cedar Valley agenda starts with attracting talent. We call it workforce. It's all the same thing. You know, everybody's looking for people. I'm always amazed when I hear from somebody and they talk about the pandemic and they say something like, well, so nobody's looking for workers. Gosh, that's not true. Everybody's looking for talent and for good workers. And so that's our #1 issue too. A new issue related to workforce, well, we call it workforce related, that I know is important to you all too, is childcare and the need for quality and affordable childcare. And we've been working hard on that. I know that Grow Cedar Valley has too. Infrastructure is an important need in Iowa. We've got a lot of work to do when it comes to roads and bridges. And then regulatory reform and the impact of COVID-19. That sort of rounds out our agenda. And again, I think it's pretty close to the Grow Cedar Valley agenda. The good news is there are 100 state representatives, 50 state senators, Republicans and Democrats. They all want to see good things happen. So does the governor. So we expect good things out of the coming session. We're going to work hard to be a good partner to the General Assembly and look forward to working with Grow Cedar Valley and so many other organizations to make that happen. Let's talk a little bit. I'm moving pretty quickly here. I hope I'm doing all right. You'll have to tell me if I'm not. People frequently do, so don't hesitate to let me know. I'm going to talk a little bit now about the state of business, at least the state of business that we see from ABI members. And, you know, if you want to look at data, and I'm looking at Randy Pilkington on my screen, and nobody does better looking data than the Institute for Decision Making and the things that Randy leads at UNI. But if you look at the data, you look at state tax receipts, housing starts, troubled business loans, unemployment rate, wage data, new business licenses, all that was in really great shape before the pandemic, but most of it still relatively is in pretty good shape. So that's pretty good. Corn and bean prices seem to be stable to rising. That's all good. So again, the data is pretty good, but what we see at ABI is about the best indicator we have is what our members tell us is happening with their business. And so each quarter we survey our members, and based on the results of the latest survey and other reports, the news is very positive. We had a number of folks who said that they were having not only strong years, but record years in 2020. They were hiring. They were seeing revenues up and sales up. In fact, they were making capital expenditures. 67% of those who responded to the latest survey said they're going to make a capital expenditure in the first quarter of 2021. So man, that's great news, whether that's a new piece of machinery or whatever it is, a new facility, that's terrific. So that's big, big news, and we're excited about that. Then we had a board meeting about 10 days ago. So we had about, 75 manufacturers in the room. Well, it was on Zoom, so 75 manufacturers participating. And you know what? No matter the industry, no matter the location, no matter the size of the operation, they were extremely positive about their business. And again, that's a generalization. Of those 75, I'm going to say something like 72 or 3 were very positive. We had a couple who were down, and we can talk about that. But again, they said they were enjoying good years, some of them having record years. Production was up. Again, hiring was up. Revenues were up. And again, that seemed to cut across geography, size, and industry. Almost all of them were hiring. So the data is positive, and the anecdotal evidence is positive. And so is that where it stops? Usually it is, with our members anyway. If business is good, that's kind of where they leave it. But that wasn't where they left it when we talked at the board meeting. We probed a bit further, and there were some underlying concerns. And as you can imagine, the first was the impact of COVID-19 and the ongoing impact and what happens there. There was a lot of concern about trade. ABI members, I don't know of a manufacturer in Iowa that doesn't export, and so trade and tariff policy is important to them. Interested and excited really to see what happens from the new administration. That was the discussion we got there, so that was great. The second uncertainty was the one about workforce, how to recruit and retain a quality workforce, and that also cut across geography, size, and industry. They were all of these folks were experiencing difficulty in hiring, and all were hiring in the room in the Zoom room that day. And so that's not just technical skills, but we continue to hear about problems with soft skills like showing up on time and being at work every day. But that was the second concern, was workforce. And then the third one was really about training and where to go for training. At ABI, we have a program called Elevate Iowa. I know that the Cedar Valley, through programs like Leader Valley and others, is a real leader when it comes to training. Our program Elevate is a formal agreement really between Iowa's community colleges and our four-year colleges to make sure we do 3 things. 1 is to raise the profile of manufacturing jobs. 2 is to get Iowans the training they need, and this could be people graduating high school. It could be people who've been in the workforce for a while. And 3rd then is to get those Iowans employed with jobs that are open right now with ABI member companies. So those things were all things identified. But again, to sum up, business was good. It was very good. There were some concerns, but mostly everybody, and I know Carrie mentioned that you all had talked about this recently too, everybody was looking very positively at 2021, and not just because we can all see a light at the end of the tunnel related to the pandemic, but because business again is strong. That's the business update. I'm gonna head into the last part of the talk here this morning, and that's really Steve and I got to talking about how the pandemic was impacting business in the state. And so one of the things we thought might be of interest, I hope it is a review of how Iowa manufacturers have been dealing with the pandemic. I'll tell you, it's kind of interesting. Back on March 11th was the date. We had a series of events here at ABI. We had a couple committee meetings, a board meeting. We had a big event where we bring people in public policy wise. I don't know, we had a couple hundred people in that day, and everybody was feeling pretty happy, very social. Took a group to the Capitol. The legislature was in session. It was a great day. And then the next day, or a week later, I should say, everything changed. That's when COVID hit for us. Some parts of the nation began to shut down, and that began to really impact ABI and Iowa manufacturers because it impacted supply chain. Then orders started being canceled. So that's what really made it real. But anyway, we've seen 6 or 7 things happen with regard to manufacturers and the pandemic. And I'll tell you, the very first thing we heard back in March, we got a ton of calls, I'll bet like Carrie and Steve and everybody at Cedar Valley did. And they were all related to the very first priority of ABI member manufacturers, and that was the health and safety of their employees. They wanted to know information about where could they go to get personal protective equipment? What about mask mandates? Where could they get sanitizer? We had some folks who their supply chain shut down even for things that they use in the plant, like sanitizer. So we spent a lot of that month, March, the second half of the month, helping manufacturers take care of their employees. And again, I think that says something pretty good about Iowa business people, but that their first concern wasn't, what is this going to do to my business as far as sales? What does this mean for a whole bunch of things? The first concern was for the health and safety of their employees. The second thing, and this we saw pretty much right after that. So I'd say the first part of April, all the calls we got then were about, we want to stay in operation. How can we stay in operation? Will there be a shutdown in Iowa? What's the governor saying? What are members of the General Assembly saying? And so we spent a lot of time early in April visiting with state officials about their plans, about how they saw it going. And obviously, we're not objective. Manufacturers wanted to stay in operation. We wanted to help them stay in operation, and that was our goal. And we're grateful to state officials who made that possible. The third thing we saw, and this was maybe the most dramatic, and it hit about, I'd say the second or third week of April, we saw huge supply chain issues. We had a number of folks, some of them in the Cedar Valley, who lost vendors because their vendors were located in states that were shut down, or they usually receive product from outside the country, and that was impacted by the pandemic. And so we spent a great deal of time identifying other vendors, identifying other sources for supplies and equipment that they use in their manufacturing. And the good news is most manufacturers, at least the ones that we've heard from here, were able to get around those. They were able to work around those supply chain issues, and that's been a real positive thing. I don't know how this is shaping up with the experiences you all had, but I'd be curious. The next thing we saw, and it hit pretty hard, was a real concern about capital, a concern about liquidity. We had a number of folks who were worried that cash flow was so impacted that they weren't going to be able to meet payroll. And that's when, of course, we worked hard with lenders and with others to make sure folks had the capital they needed. That's when Congress also started talking about the Paycheck Protection Program. And boy, there are hundreds of Iowa companies who participated in the Paycheck Protection Program. Many ABI members did. What we saw for many of them, though, they had this worry about liquidity. They signed up for the Paycheck Protection Program, and in the end, they didn't need it. Everything kind of worked out. And so the good news, again, is that lenders in this state were able to help provide the liquidity in most cases, and the federal government program really made a difference too. And then about that time, we started to have kind of a run on personal protective equipment and other things. And so we started to hear from members, this was sort of the fifth thing we noticed, that they were retooling. They were shutting down production lines, retooling, and starting to produce new products like sanitizer, like face masks or face shields or gowns. I know a company in north central Iowa, High Capacity in Humboldt. They rebuild tractor engines and ag equipment engines. So they work with metal, and instead they shut down a line and started to manufacture gowns and face masks for North Iowa hospitals. That's terrific. I know a number of ABI member companies that retool to begin to manufacture sanitizer and those sorts of things. And I guess the good news there is twofold. One, they're able to do it. It's not easy, as you all know, to shut down a production line, start it up again to retool. They were able to do it. Number one, they were willing to do it. And then number two, many of them got new products out of the deal. They continued to make sanitizer and those sorts of things. And so that's all good. That was sort of the sixth thing we saw, that folks kept those products in their inventory and in their product catalog and created a new niche. And I guess that's good too. Here's the last thing we've seen. We've seen a real change in how inventory works on both ends, really. As you know, just-in-time inventory management is a big deal, and certainly a way to manage cost. But manufacturers found out that they were waiting longer, even if they could work around the supply chain issues, they were waiting longer to get their product. It hindered their ability to provide product on their end to their customers. And so we're seeing it on both ends. By that, I mean, people are getting more inventory in and holding it. So in the past, you wouldn't keep a lot of supplies on hand. They're expanding those supplies they keep on hand so that when they get an order, they're ready to make it. And then they're keeping more inventory, finished product on the other end, so that when they get an order, they can fill it faster. Those were some of the things we saw with regard to the pandemic. And again, I'd say the thing that is striking is that throughout the whole thing, people were quite positive, quite focused on making sure they get through it. And again, always focused on can we make sure we're keeping our employees safe and healthy. So that's it. I'm not sure I've covered anything you want to talk about. I'd be happy to take questions, one thing I've learned is when we're doing these Zoom things, I speak a lot faster than I do in person, so I apologize, but be happy to answer any questions or talk about whatever's on your mind this morning. And really curious if you saw some of the same things or if you saw things differently than what we saw here at ABI.
Super, Mike. Thank you so much. A lot of good information and in 22 minutes. That's pretty darn good. Do any of you have questions for Mike? Just go ahead and chime in. There's no reason to do chat and so on. Are his observations pretty consistent with what you're seeing out there?
Mike, just a quick question for you. With everything that happened on needing to go online quicker and do virtual meetings, and what did you see from your membership or hear from your membership about either the capability or the capacity issues they might have with telecommunications, broadband communication type of activities? Was it sufficient or was it spotty? Kind of what, you have such a broad scope of members. Could you give us kind of a reflection of that?
You bet, Randy, I'll do that. For the most part, manufacturers in the state have not experienced broadband issues because they spend what it takes to make sure they have the broadband they need. And that can be expensive in some parts of the state. Our other members who aren't manufacturers, we don't have any retail. Well, I take that back. Hy-Vee and Fairway are pretty large retailers, but we don't have general run-of-the-mill retail folks. But those folks I know sometimes have challenges. The real issue we heard, Randy, from members was getting familiar with the technology, whether it was Zoom or Teams or one of the other platforms, WebEx. There was some delay in getting used to that technology, but we have not heard from members that experience large technology problems. I will tell you that as an organization, we believe Iowa does need to expand broadband. That's part of that infrastructure issue that we talked about very earlier. So that's what we saw. So I'm going to go on here, but all I can tell you, Randy, is that's what we saw. I see a question about tax reform, and so I'll address it. Legislative leaders have told us that there will be tax reform. You all know that the governor has a pretty ambitious initiative that she rolled out last year that related to tax reform. It was taken off the table because there's so much uncertainty about what would happen with state finances related to the pandemic, but it's expected to come back. And so we don't know yet what the tax reform will be, but we're told there's going to be some. Our concern, of course, is for a long time we thought federal deductibility didn't make sense as it used to And so that's an issue we hope is addressed in a way that is that treats taxpayers well. And we don't know what else is going to happen, but we'll see. I believe there will be some sort of tax reform. And Reed, I see, who says he's retired, but I know better. Reed, it's nice to know that you're on the call today. How does Iowa stack up with neighboring states in terms of addressing manufacturing issues? I'll tell you one big thing that's happened. Iowa manufacturers have benefited from COVID shutdowns in other states. And of course, we don't wish ill will on anyone, but some of our folks have become suppliers to folks who faced supply chain issues in other states. Some of them have started to make new products. And so I got to tell you, the pandemic has been mostly positive in that regard for Iowa manufacturers. One of the states that we hear from a lot, people who did business with Illinois manufacturers were experiencing all kinds of problems there, and that's definitely benefited Iowa manufacturers. Same with California. So that'd be what I'd say there, Reed, and hope you're well. Pam's question is capital expenditure movement. Yes, that's a big part of it, the move towards Industry 4.0 operations. I'm biased in favor of Iowa manufacturers, but to be honest, for a long time, they probably didn't embrace technology. Of course, a global company like Deere leads the way on technology, but some Iowa manufacturers did not. And the move towards Industry 4.0 involves a big focus on technology. And what a great thing TechWorks has been. That's certainly been a help to Iowa manufacturers, and a great thing Grow Cedar Valley does. Oh, Daryl, nice to see you too. Okay, seems to be doing well. Net migration has shifted. Yes, more people leave the state than move to the state. Yes, the talk about skilled.
By the way, Mike's reading out of the chat in case any of you are wondering what's happening here.
Sure. Thank you, Steve. The focus on skilled workers, that's still a huge focus for all ABI members, not just the manufacturers. And I mentioned this Elevate program we have. There's our attempt to get folks the training they need to be ready for jobs that exist right now. I'll tell you the real thing that our members think is the issue. We need more people. We need more people in Iowa. We need them in all parts of the state. But yes, there are so many great programs through Iowa's Regents institutions and community colleges that will train folks if we can just get them here and get them in. We have some folks, some ABI members who they'll take anybody and they'll train them up. Then we have others who want to, have somebody who comes with a credential. But certainly that's an ongoing issue, Daryl. You're right.
Does ABI have any big ideas about things that the legislature could do or communities could do to attract people from other parts of the country?
We think this, Daryl, and I don't know that it's very glamorous, but one, we need to have a state that's well run, fiscally sound. Certainly attention to environmental issues is a part of attracting folks. Everybody knows we have a water quality issue in this state. We need to address that. We think these big flashy programs that some states have seem to come and go. Attention to things that everybody knows matter is really where we're focused. And then we're focused primarily on providing our member companies with the programs and services they need to help them address the issue. I'll tell you one thing that has started to happen. Maybe it took too long, maybe not. I don't know. But I was beginning to address wages in this state for a long time. One of the things that was an attraction to some employers was the low wage base here. In the end, that's not the way to attract quality workers. And so the data shows that wages are rising, and that's probably a good thing too, frankly. I would not want to be an employer in a market and pay the lowest wage because, boy, I'll never find workers. So that's something else, I'd say. Going back to the chat here. Oh, Chris, hope all's well at the Western home. Revenue estimating. Yeah, the question is about the revenue estimating conference report. The REC meets today, and that will drive budget conversations for the next fiscal year. You've probably all seen the data so far. Revenues are behind projections, not as substantively as some thought. There's some who believe that the REC will take into account some forecast data that seems to indicate that Iowa will do better in the coming months than other folks thought. All I can tell you is, yeah, it will definitely impact what the legislature does for sure. And we're all eager to see what happens or what the projection is.
Thanks, Mike.
I'm watching the chat too and see that right now we've got a little bit of a lull. I'm going to ask you sort of almost a point blanker here, Mike, because you've alluded to it. You've talked about the need for improving water quality. You talked about some ideas of tax reform, but of course, the governor's big Invest in Iowa initiative starts with that extra penny of sales tax. Is that something that ABI is going to put their weight behind and support this year?
I'll give you a point blank answer, Steve. I don't know. Let me tell you where we are so far. One, it's my view, based on what I hear from legislative leaders, that particular aspect has a heavy lift as it is now structured. What legislative leaders are saying, I told to the governor, is that we'll consider that, but we'd like to have some other adjustments in some other areas. If that happens, I'll bet we'd get on board with that. Right now, too early to say what the final proposal will look like, and so I can't give you an answer on whether we'd support it or not. But I know this: I've been at ABI for 15 years, and over time I've seen a shift. ABI was never an anti-tax organization. I'm biased again, but I think it's been a progressive organization as far as, sometimes we have to invest in ourselves. If we don't invest in ourselves, who's going to? And but there's definitely a much more open mind about things like the increase in the penny sales tax, as long as there are benefits that come with that. And so I got to believe that the governor and legislative leaders will get together, and I believe we'd be on board with that and look to help get it passed.
Other questions or observations that you'd like to share with Mike?
Oh, Paul. Good to know Paul's on. Boy, let me tell you, if you don't know, Advance Iowa does fantastic things for Iowa. And so it's great to work with them. They're a great partner too. And Paul's question is the impact of the pandemic accelerating business transition. You know what, Paul? Again, I can only go on what ABI members are telling me. And the question is, has the pandemic accelerated business transitions? And it's been the opposite as far as ABI member companies have talked about. They have held off on transitions because they want to wait until the pandemic goes by. Paul knows, and you probably all know, that in Iowa we have a huge number of companies that are very successful, significant employers in their communities, many times owned by someone, a woman or a man who is in their late 60s, early 70s, maybe older. And there's going to be a big transition of a number of those companies in the coming years. But Paul, so far, most of the folks that we've talked to here have sort of held off. And that's an issue that really needs to be addressed. And that's one that Advance Iowa has done great work in helping companies address. It's interesting, though. Owners don't like to talk about the sale of their company mostly. That's what we hear. You've had some terrific successes in the Cedar Valley. I think about Standard Golf and how it would have been so easy for them to be bought by someone and to go elsewhere. And instead, Peter Voorhees and his family were able to do an employee stock ownership plan that kept the company there. And it's terrific. So lots of great success stories in the Cedar Valley.
Mike, I'm going to kind of follow up on Steve's question about Invest in Iowa. When I was in the legislature, a letter that I got from one of the very top people at John Deere in the Quad Cities went something like, you're going to be pestered with people that want to cut taxes and do all those things, but don't forget that the real job we have is to attract people, employees to our state, and they're all over, and they'll come from all over the world. The people will be happy with their job, but the spouses will make the decision based on their families and education and safety and attractions and all those kinds of things. And I really believe that that's right. Everybody now is looking at California. You know, everybody knows somebody wants to leave California as a domestic example.
Willard, let me first say that every day you're missed in the General Assembly. Thanks for your service there. It's great to see you. So is Kay, by the way. She's missed too.
Yeah.
Hey, that's it. And as we just talked about a little bit ago, if we aren't all going to invest in ourselves, why should anybody or who else will invest in what we do? So that's why I think there's been this transition over time here at ABI that folks understand cutting taxes or lower taxes is not always the answer. And we need to make sure we're doing those things that allow us to attract people and have a quality of life. So all I can do is agree with you.
Anybody else? Well, it looks like, Mike, you've provided all the information that anybody could possibly need this morning. And appreciate those of you that asked the questions.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciated being with the group, and thanks for being so gracious.
Well, you're always welcome. You know that, and we appreciate having you with us as well. I would just tell all of you that are on. This is a great turnout this morning, and I'm hoping that it'll be even bigger on the 8th of January, our next Friday forum, when we'll have sort of our annual legislative preview with two of our favorite legislators here in the Cedar Valley, Speaker of the House, Pat Grassley, representing the Republicans, and our own Senator Dotzler, Bill Dotzler, Assistant Minority Leader in the Senate, representing the Democratic point of view. And we'll hear what both of the parties are thinking about for the upcoming session, and get to enjoy the banter that always goes back and forth between those two good friends as well. So 8 o'clock in the morning on Friday, January 8th. Look forward to seeing you all then. And thank you very much for being with us this morning. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. We'll see you on the 8th.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Mike. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thanks.